and welcome. My name is Maria, and this is In the Steps of the Vikings channel. In this video, we will continue to explore burial mounds, this time on the island of Mounds. If you haven't watched my previous video, where I gave a short introduction to ancient burial sites in general, and we visited the burial mound of a sorcerer in Villigårdsgraven, you can still watch it. I will leave the link below. Today, we will be exploring a passage grave mound from inside, and there also will be a surprise game. So without any further ado, let's start the journey. Mounds is a Danish island in the Baltic Sea that is located in southeastern Denmark, about 2 hours drive from Copenhagen. Its area is 218 squared kilometers, or 84 square miles. Mounds is home for 9,235 people, or at least that number is correct for the 1st of January 2020. Mounds is one of Denmark's most popular destinations for tourists, with its white chalk cliffs known as the White Cliffs of Mounds, fresco-decorated churches, historic buildings, and the market town of Stege, which is the largest town on the island of Mounds. Visitors are also attracted to the beautiful countryside, sandy beaches, and Stone Age and Bronze Age passage graves and monuments. Mounds is connected to Zealand, or as the locals call it here, Zeeland, by the Queen Alexandrine Bridge, the one we are actually passing now. This bridge was opened for traffic on May the 30th, 1943, and named after the Queen Consort Alexandrine, wife of King Christian X of Denmark. The bridge is 746 meters, or 2,448 feet long, and considered to be one of Denmark's most attractive bridges. And indeed, since I have visited Mounds several times, I can assure you that this bridge is beautiful in any weather. Here is a short footage of how it looks on a bright sunny day. If you drive through this bridge, you will shortly find yourself in the largest city on Mounds, called Stege, with population of almost 3,800 people. Stege grew into a city from a small fishing village and became a merchant town in the 13th century. Fishing of herring was the town's most important source of money. Today, however, its economy relies mainly on the service sector. The town has old churches, historic buildings, narrow streets, markets, and many restaurants and cafes. Queen Alexandrine Bridge is not the only way to get to the island of Mounds. Another impressive bridge you can see if you drive to Mounds through a little island of Faroe. The Faroe bridges will go all the way from Zealand to Falster Island, but we are approximately midway across the strait will take an exit towards the island of Faroe, and then smaller bridge from Faroe provide access to Bow, and from there to the island of Mounds. The Faroe bridges were opened by Queen Margaret II, the current Queen of Denmark, on the 4th of June 1985. The island of Mounds has about 120 different mounds. We have just arrived to our first megalithic tomb. This one is a passage grave mound called Sparresmindestuen. It was built around year 3200 before Christ, which makes it 1,000 years older than the Pyramid of Cheops. So what are passage graves? Here is the general image of a passage grave. A long corridor formed by several sets of stones positioned vertically with a cover stone on top of each pair. This passage leads to a burial chamber room. The entire construction is covered with earth. Most common are passage graves with one corridor and one room. However, there are graves with several corridors and rooms. Such constructions illustrate the early community's building capabilities and the colossal investment of both time and manpower that were put into the construction of those tombs. We are flying now above the mound, and you probably already can guess where the entrance is. Sparresmindestuen was excavated by a non-professional. As far as I understood, it was a merchant, Gustav Hey. from Stege, the city we just have been to. He explored this mound in the 1850s, and so unfortunately neither findings nor information from this excavation have been preserved. In fact, we don't know if Gustav Hey found anything. Tomb robbers could have raided this mound even centuries before. In the 1880s, this mound was registered and protected by the National Museum, and so as a result, its structure is well preserved. The entrance is on the southeast side of the mound. Once we get closer to the doorway, you will be able to notice that at the entrance, two framing stones are not supported by horizontal capstone. According to the information sign, those stones originally had a cover horizontal stone that would be used to reseal the chamber after each burial. So during the burial, the chamber would be opened and the stone would be placed on top of the framing stones, providing a roof to the beginning of the corridor. Once the burial is over, the passage would be sealed using the same stone, but this time rotated and functioning as a door. This 7 meters long corridor provides an access to the large burial chamber. I found that the best way to move inside is in a squatting position, at least at the beginning, where the corridor is very narrow. As you move along it, the space around becomes a bit bigger. Have you noticed the stone arch in front? It's an evidence for additional doors that once sealed the tomb completely from the outside world. Now all that is left is a door jamb or a stone frame that once held a wooden or a stone door. I wonder if this door was used only by priests. Would they come here during the burial itself just once, when they added a body to the script? Or maybe there were more rituals to be performed after death, and so they entered the mound through this door several times during the mourning period. The end of the 7 meters corridor merges into the main chamber center, forming together with the corridor a T-shaped space inside the mound. The main burial chamber is 10 meters long and approximately 2 meters wide. Almost immediately upon entering the burial room, I was noticed by a bat that clearly was intimidated by my presence here. I'm trying to film it with my camera, but the bat just wouldn't rest. Eventually, I managed to focus my camera on the poor thing just before it disappeared between two stones of the ceiling. The bat wasn't the only resident of the mound. I found several spiders and a couple of mosquitoes inside as well. Let's take a look at the construction of the burial chamber. It has 21 large supporting stones. The chamber is more narrow in the middle, where it merges with the corridor, and wider towards its ends. Apparently, it's a local feature seen in several other passage graves on Moon. In the constructions of burial chambers, first the builders laid down the big supporting stones, 21 in this case. Then the space between them is filled with smaller flat stones. And afterwards, in order to create a uniform height and architecturally stable surface, on top of the supporting stones are usually placed large flat stones. And on top of the created uniform surface, heavy ceiling stones are placed with the flat side down towards the chamber to create an almost continuous ceiling. In case of Sparresmindestuen, there are 7 ceiling stones, but only one of them rests directly on the support stones. 6 other ceiling stones, as you can see here, are placed on additionally inserted flat stones that align the surface and make it steady to support the massive roof stones. To completely seal the chamber from the topsoil, the builders used lime mortar between the stones. There is a lot of limestones on this island, as you will see soon in part 2 of this journey on the island of Moon. You can actually see the evidence of limestone in the white traces on the supporting stone here and on other stones inside. They are mainly minerals that get leached out of the lime mortar and perhaps some other slightly soluble minerals washed out of the topsoil by rain. When the water dries inside the interior of the mound, it leaves white traces that can be seen here on stones. By the way, in many other burial sites, for the same purpose of isolation, builders used bark of a birch tree. Reconstruction of a birch bark ceiling you can see in the model of this house. The floor of the burial chamber and the floor of the corridor have probably been originally covered with stone tiles or a layer of burnt flint. Also, it is quite possible that there were actually some wooden decorations inside. I'm now walking away from the camera so that you will be able to get a better idea of the chamber's dimensions, and I will be able to find the perfect place to hide the capsule for the surprise game that I mentioned in the beginning of this video. This time, inside the capsule, I put a little pendant bottle filled with blue crystals that symbolize little drops of water that can be seen on some of the stones inside this mound. Since there is absolutely no information on what was found here, I decided to add a little bead in the shape of a fish, because many times bodies would be buried with food and personal things like a broken sword, especially if the deceased was a warrior that perhaps died in a battle. The capsule is hidden somewhere between the stones, and your job is to find it. No need to remove stones. It can be very dangerous, both for you and for this ancient grave. So basically, all you need to find it is your eyes, plus a small source of light might be helpful. Good luck! I am now leaving this mound through the same long corridor I entered it, wondering, who were the people that built it? How many generations it served? Was it a family crypt, or many families used it? From some other mounds, we know that people reused them for generations, adding bodies and sometimes also removing previous bodies. In addition, tomb robbers from different eras raided burial mounds. Sometimes those thieves even lose a coin or some object that can point out to the century and place from which the burglar came from. Let's give a final look to this magnificent monument of history. Isn't it unbelievable that people who lived here 5,200 years ago managed to construct something so impressive that is still here with us today? As I mentioned earlier, this burial mound is 1,000 years older than the Pyramid of Cheops. Isn't it an evidence of a great civilization whose descendants built the modern countries of Scandinavia? Denmark, of course, not the only country with burial mounds. We find those mounds in many other European countries. So perhaps it points out that our ancestors were quite mobile, and at least some of them traveled long distance and brought back knowledge that helped them in construction of those monuments. We will be now heading towards the famous cliffs of the island of Moon, and on our way we will stop by another remarkable passage grave called Sømarkedyssen, or Dolmen. The beautiful Dolmen is located 90 meters above sea level, just east of Sømarke town on the eastern side of the island of Moon, near the cliffs of Moon. The tomb dates back to the Neolithic period, around 3400 before Christ. Basically, it also was a passage grave, but 200 years older than Sparresmindestuen, the passage grave we visited before. Dolmen was once entirely covered by earth, forming part of a burial mound. The National Museum first described this dolmen grave in 1880, and at this time the dolmen looked exactly like it looks now, half ruined and uncovered. The close location of this grave to a road that apparently was here for centuries made this dolmen an easy target for both stone cutting and treasure digging. You can clearly see that there is no stacks of flat stone tiles between the big supporting stones, as we saw in the previous passage grave. Remember, I told you that during the constructions, the builders would first put the big supporting stones, and then the space between the big stones would be filled with smaller stones. Looks like the flat smaller stones were taken out and used somewhere else. And of course, there is no information of any findings from this dolmen. Obviously, everything disappeared way before 1880. The year it was protected by the National Museum. I will enter the passage grave now to show you how it looks from inside. Instead of crawling through the remains of the corridor, I just entered the grave's main chamber from one of the sides, where some stones are missing, as it is just much easier, especially with a camera. Notice that the large carved stone of the main chamber is split. According to the legend, it was once struck by lightning, and as a result, the stone split. But if you look closely, you will notice that almost quarter of the northeast side of the stone is missing, and it is clearly broken off. So most likely the stone was broken during stone cutting, and its part is now somewhere else. What makes Sømarkedyssen special, in addition to its beautiful appearance, is that 458 circular pits, so-called cup marks, have been carved into it. Cup marks are associated with Bronze Age. The reason behind the digging of those small pits are not completely understood. Some researchers believe that cup marks might have been part of a fertility cult or part of some religious ritual. Others claim that it could have been just art, or maybe cup marks appeared during some game or as a result of tool-making process. This dolmen dates back to the Neolithic period, while the cup marks are from the Bronze Age and therefore at least 1,700 years younger than the construction of this grave. This means that the upper side of the corridor's cover stone, this is where most of the cup marks are found, must have been visible and accessible during Bronze Age for the cup marks to be carved on it. It's a bit challenging to see the pits on a video taken with a drone, so I marked some of them with black dot. Most of the pits are carved into the cover stone of the passage. The largest cup marks are around 5 centimeters in diameter. Sømarke Dolmen is one of Denmark's most decorated dolmens. We are unlikely to find the clear meaning of those magical symbols from the distant past. However, we can be fascinated that after more than 3,000 years, they still can be seen on top of a rock. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by clicking the like button and perhaps leave a comment. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to the channel, and I will see you in the next video where we will visit the beautiful cliffs of Mounds and explore other ancient monuments here.